Good morning, children. Today we are going to take up the first topic of geography of class 10, and the topic name is resources and development. Now let's discuss. In this chapter we are going to talk about the resources, and there's a saying on the screen, and this has been given by Mahatma Gandhi ji. There is enough for everyone's need and not for anybody's greed. That means we have enough in the nature, in our surrounding, for the basic necessities that we have in day-to-day life. But yes, it's not enough for the greed. So let's start up with the first topic of class 10, geography. Now the topic says that how we are utilizing the resources, how we have developed along with the resources, and how we are overutilizing the resources, and what are the outcomes of that we are facing in today's world. So as far as if you are going to talk about the definition of the resources, the definition of the resources is like everything that is available around us, which satisfies some need of ours, and it is technologically accessible and economically feasible and culturally accepted. So that can be termed as a resource. Now let's see, like when we talk about technologically accessible, that means whether we have the technology to use that particular resource. And the second thing is economically feasible. That means suppose a particular thing is available, a particular iron ore is available in some patch of Ghaziabad, but it might not be economically feasible. And we might be having number of resources located at different parts of the world, but until we have the economic feasibility, we do not go and have a mine in that area, and we start operating that mine, and we start taking out the iron ore from that area. So it got to be economically accessible. That means the quantity matters. And then culturally acceptable. Now what is culturally acceptable? That means suppose if we are going to have one food processing industry of probably of a beef industry located in any part of strategic location like religious place of Hindus, so it won't be able to work in that area. So culturally it is not accepted in that area. So anything which is accepted culturally, which is economically feasible, we have the technology to use it, and it is obviously it is satisfying our needs, then only that thing can be termed as a resource. Now the next is like what we have in the presentation is what are the different types of resources we have with us, then how we are developing the resources, how do we plan the different resources, how to planning regarding how we are going to use it, and then what are the land resources, then soil as a resource. So these are the topics that we are going to discuss in this presentation. Now this thing is, this is the classification of the resources. What are the different types of resources we have with us? Renewable, non-renewable, then basically the resources can be divided into two parts. One is the natural and another one is the human resource. Now natural can be again, which is available around us, can be subdivided into two categories, that is renewable and non-renewable resources, which are going to stay with us, and some of the resources which won't be there with us. Then human resource, human is the greatest resource, because we are the one who are actually making the things around us, we are converting them into resources. Fine, so this is the different types of resources. As far as the classification of the resources are concerned, we can classify the resources on the basis of origin, then on the basis of origin, that is biotic and abiotic. Then we can classify the resources on the basis of exhaustibility, that means like how long they are going to stay with us. Then we can classify the resources on the basis of ownership. Then we can classify the resources on the basis of the development. Now let's see in detail like what are the meaning for all of them. Like the first one is the biotic, on the basis of the origin, biotic resources. Biotic is all the living things that are there on the earth, that exist on the earth. They come under the biotic resources. Then abiotic resources are those like metals and rocks, which are non-living, inorganic. So they are termed as abiotic resources. Now the next classification is on the basis of the exhaustibility. Now, on the basis of the exhaustibility, we can divide it into renewable resource and non-renewable resource. Now, renewable resources are those resources which can be renewed, which can be reproduced, chemical and mechanical process, by the help of chemical and mechanical process. And for example for this is solar energy, wind energy. All of them, they are going to stay with us forever, and they have number of benefits over the non-renewable ones. Then non-renewable resources, they are there on the surface of the earth. We take them, sometime they exist in deep inside the crust. But the time period taken by these resources to form is quite long. Suppose if we take an example of coal or any other particular mineral, the period of formation for a particular mineral is quite long. So we won't be able to assess them. Once it is finished, we won't be able to see them in our own lifespan, because it takes number of thousands and millions of years to form. Now let's see what is the next classification. The next is on the basis of the ownership. Now on the basis of the ownership, we can divide it into 4 parts. One is the individual resource, like any particular property, like we own a car, we own a house, is it's an individual resource. When we talk about the next is the community owned resources. Now the resources which are being shared by the people, but by a particular community, by a particular area, people living in a specific in a society, they are using those resources, so they are termed as community resources. Now if we take some examples like village grazing grounds, some burial grounds, or if we talk about some kind of community centers in some of the areas, they are part of the community resources. Now next is the national resource. Now if you are going to speak about the national resources, they are a particular country, within the boundary of the country, any particular resource, that is a national resource. And we have the legal powers to acquire even the private property of a person. Like for an example, if Delhi Metro is having some kind of a project, coming up a new project in some part of Delhi or NCR area, so if there is a public property or there is a private property in between, so in that case it can be taken away for by the authority, can be taken away for the public good. So that would be termed as a national resource in that case. Then the next is the international resources. Now the international resources are those resources, the oceanic resource beyond 200 nautical miles of the exclusive economic zone belong to the open ocean, and no individual country can utilize these without the consensus of the international institutions. So within the 200 nautical miles, beyond the new 200 nautical miles, the resources that are there, that belongs to the international resources. So there is a procedure to assess those resources. So any country cannot go and can have an assess of those resources which are outside, which are beyond 200 nautical miles. Now on the basis of the status of development, we can divide it into so 2 parts. One is the potential resource and another one is the developed resource. Now let's see what is the potential. Potential resource, like the resources which have not been put to the use and they are found in a particular area. Like for an example, Rajasthan is having lot of solar power potential. Similarly, Gujarat is also having a lot of solar power potential, but we haven't started using them to the full extent. Though we have started using solar energy, probably not in every part of Rajasthan or in every part of Gujarat. So not to the full extent, so it can be termed as a potential resource. Now let's move on to the next, that is the developed resource. Now developed resources are those resources we already, we have done the survey, we know what is the quantity, what is the quality of that particular resource, and we have been determined for utilization and we have been using them. So those are the developed resources. Now next is the stock. Now the material stock is the material in the environment which have the potential to satisfy the human need but cannot be used because of the technology and are included among the stock. That means we have the resource with us and there is a potential to satisfy that particular resource, but we don't have the technology with us right now. So we are not able to assess or we are not able to use that resource, that particular thing as a resource. So that will fall into the stock. And for an example, if you talk about the stock, the good example of the stock is like, suppose if you are taking water is a compound of two gases, one is the hydrogen and oxygen. And so there is a specific figure for the formula for water is H2O, that means hydrogen 2 and oxygen is 1. So if we don't have the technology with us to separate hydrogen and oxygen from water. Fine, so we don't have the technology, so we are going to term it as a stock resource. Then next comes the reserves. They are the subset of the stock which are used with the help of existing technological knowledge. For example, water in lakes, dams, forests is a reserve which can be used in the future. So we have the forest reserves with us. We are using them, but we are not using them the entire quantity that is available with us. So that is a reserve. For an example, if I have some amount of money in the bank that is there with me, but I am not using that entire money at one go. So whatever amount I need, I go to a particular ATM, I withdraw some amount of money and I use it. So similarly, so it's an example for reserve. So whatever amount we need, we use it, but as and when the requirement would be there, we will be using that. So that is the reserve. Now the next topic of the chapter is the development of the resources. We have been since very long we have been utilizing the things that are the free gifts of the nature, and we have been using those resources, and it is actually very, very essential, because without the resources we won't be able to survive. And similarly, since the evolution of the human beings, we were we used to live in caves, then people started early men started hunting, then starting living, making caves, then then the man has learned how to lit fire, and then the invention of the wheel has happened. So gradually man has discovered that there are a number of things in the nature that can be used as resources. But now, till now, the position has come then where the human beings have been using the resources beyond the limits. So how actually it's a free gift of the nature, and when we start using the resources indiscriminately, in that case it leads to number of problems. Now what are those problems? So we can actually see it on the screen. Depletion of the resources for satisfying the greed of few individuals, because the people, those who are having a lot, the people, those who are rich, they gather the resources with themselves just to earn more profit so that they can sell it at higher prices later on. Then depletion of the resources happens. Then second is the accumulation of the resources in few hands, because it gets divided into two segments, that is rich and poor, haves and have-nots. Similarly, then the indiscriminate exploitation of the resources, that also leads to the ecological crisis, global crisis. then global warming, depletion of the ozone layer, because when we start using indiscriminately beyond a limit, so that is actually harming the environment in which we are living. And it also leads to number of problems like environmental pollution, then land degradation, so all these. So therefore, resource, if the present trend of the resource depletion is actually with the few individuals and with the few countries, the future of the planet is actually in dark. So what is required then? What can we do about it? The thing is that so there is a need to plan the resources, how we are going to use it, so that they are going to stay with us and we are not actually, harming the resources around us, we are not harming the environment, we are not depleting the quality of the air that is around us, we are not depleting the quality of the land around us. So there is a kind of planning that is required, or we can say there's a need to plan the resources for sustainable existence of all forms of life. Now, if we talk about a particular term, that is resource planning. Now, what is it? Planning is widely accepted strategy for the judicious use of resources. Now, why do we need it? The importance of the resource planning is, in a country like India, we have lot of diversity as far as the availability of the resources are concerned. And similarly, all the resources, they are not equally distributed throughout the earth. So, like, we might have certain resources in one area and we might not have it in other area. So every area has its own importance and is having own special set of resources available in that area. So when we have the resources not properly distributed throughout the surface, so in that area, in that case, we need to distribute the resources properly throughout the areas which are not having it. So there are some regions which can be considered self-sufficient in terms of the availability of the resources, and there are some which have the acute shortage of some resources. So good example of that is Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh rich in coal, Rajasthan rich in solar energy. So we have to save for the future generations, and we have to avoid the shortage, wastage of the resources, and then to reduce the regional and personal disparity, like whatever differences we have in the society around us. So if we are going to plan the resources, so that can be taken care, and to control the global and economic crisis, to control the global warming and depletion of the ozone layer. So that is why, if we are looking forward for all this, so we got to have resource planning. Now let's see how it is being done in India. So the very first, there are 3 steps for that, how we do the resource planning in India. So 3 major steps are there. The first one is the identification and inventory of the resources by surveying and mapping. So that means identification, that we identify the resource, and what is inventory, we make a record of that, like what is the number of the resources, what is the quantity, where it is being located. So all those details are being noted down, and inventory of the resources by surveying and mapping, and this can only be done by doing practical survey onto the ground and mapping that particular area regarding the location of that particular resource. And then after doing that, we evolve a planning structure. Then we come to the planning part, like, okay, how much is the particular resource we have with us? Now how we are actually going to use it, how we are going to make it available to the other areas where the resource is deficient. So, and then the third part is matching the resource development plans with the overall national development plans. So, like, a Government of India makes 5-year plans and number of other plans at the central level. So and at the regional level, so we got to have some connection with, so that, the plans that are being made at the central level, and we need to see how it is actually practical practically, the things have been implemented at the ground level. So there is no major gap as such, and if there is a gap, then we have to go back and look for the reasons, and again we have to start for the, we need to plan for the resources. Now, what is sustainable development and Agenda 21? Sustainable development, I think everybody knows, because we have been studying this topic in geography, and I think probably in other subjects also. Sustainable development, it is a development which is done without compromising the needs of future generation or damaging the nature. So that means we are actually saving the resources, and we are looking forward that the future generation is not going to compromise with the availability of the resources that we had it in our time. So we are going to use the resources in such a way, in a judicious manner, so that it is not exhausted when the turn of the future generation comes. So we have to use it very carefully, and we have to see that we are taking care of our needs, and simultaneously we are not actually wasting them. Then comes Agenda 21. Now, Agenda 21 is a agenda which is Rio de Janeiro Earth Summit in 1992. So 100 heads of the different states from different countries, they have come for the first International Earth Summit, and over there they have come up with some of the principles and adopted as a Agenda 21, and then they thought that these are the certain guidelines that every nation has to actually take care of those certain guidelines. But how it is applicable, so whenever, like all the heads, they go back to their own countries, they are going to sit with their own authorities, and they will jot down Agenda 21 for their own country. And that is how, now the main aim of the Agenda 21 was to achieve the global sustainable development, and to eradicate poverty, and to minimize the environmental damage. So this was these are some of the details of the Earth Summit 1992, and so that is how it was. The major focus was there onto the global climatic change and biological diversity, and that is how certain decisions were taken which were being people were looking forward to take it in action in their own countries. Now the next topic of the chapter is the land as a resource, because every resource that we get is from the land. So all the things around us, like suppose if you are talking about natural vegetation, we are talking about the wildlife or human life, so transportation and communication system. So everything that we are doing is onto the land, and all the resources we are getting from the land. So our duty is to carefully plan how we are going to use them, so that we don't spoil the land. And now India, as far as the soil part on the land is essential for the plant growth. Then roads and railways are being set up onto that, and the vegetation and wildlife is supported by the land. So it is actually very, very important. So as far as the land use in India is concerned, so we can actually see this in the pie chart. The plains are 43% of the area, then mountains are 27%, and the plateaus are 30%. So this is the data which was actually is a data that has been 1952 National Forest Policy. Now a forest area in the country is far lower than the desired 33% of the geographical area. So it is less, so we got to have more forest area under the as far as the land is concerned. Then now let's see how we are using the land in India. So we have actually, you know, differently we have been using the land. The first is the some of the land is under forest. Then next is land not for cultivation. Probably it's a wasteland or a barren land, or maybe probably it is, you know, it is the buildings are there on that particular land, or roads are there, or factories are there. So that is why it is not being put into cultivation. And then comes the third category, that is the other uncultivated land. Now this is the permanent pastures, because permanent pastures, so that is why it is not being cultivated, or it is a grazing land, or the land which is you know, under miscellaneous tree crops, like, you know, it's a grove area, or cultivable wasteland which is being left uncultivated, so that, you know, the soil regains its fertility for more than 5 years. So, and then the next category is the fallow land. Now what is fallow land? Fallow land is the land which is actually left uncultivated for a particular period of time. So fallow land can be divided into two parts. One is the current fallow land. Current is left without cultivation for one or less than one agricultural year. And then other than current fallow land is left uncultivated for the past 1 to 5 agricultural years. So this is the two subcategories of the fallow land. And then comes the net sown area. Now net sown area is area sown more than once in an agricultural year, plus net sown area is known as the gross cropped area. So this is the various, you know, how we are using land in India. And now let's see, you know, the 93% of the total geographical area is most of the area, like the total geographical area in India is 3.28 million square kilometers, and the land use data, however, is available only for the 93%, because, you know, the northeastern part of India is not being surveyed. We don't have all the details, or we don't have the reports of the northeastern states except the Assam state. Now let's see, the next topic of the chapter is the soil. Now we already know that, you know, the uppermost layer of the earth's crust, which is loose or broken, and it is very useful for plants, and the quality of the soil depends upon the parent rock. And then soil is formed mainly due to the process of weathering, and as a result of the weathering, a layer of the loose rock material is formed on the land surface. And formation of soil we have already studied in other subjects also, and we have studied this in the class 7th and class 9th as well. Now how we can say that soil is a resource to us? Because, you know, man actually depends upon the soil for all the things that we have it around us, directly or indirectly. For example, the food that we eat comes from soil. Agriculture that we practice can be practiced only if we have soil. Then man gets the material needed for shelter and clothing directly or indirectly from the soil. The fabric that we are wearing, it comes from some plants that grows onto the soil. Then soil is also essential for the growth of forests, because, you know, for maintaining certain kind of balance in the atmosphere, forests are also very important. Forests are important because we get rainfall, we get number of forest products from the forest, and availability or the level of the water can be, you know, there are number of factors which affect if we have forest with us. So we have a lot of importance of forest, and these forests, they grow on the soil itself. Now let's see, this is the map in which we can actually see what are the different types of soils that we have it throughout the India. So if you are going to see, on the northern part of India, that is, we have the forest and mountain soil. Then comes the next category of the soil, that is the alluvial soil. We have it in the northern plains, and then some of the coastal regions of India are also having alluvial soil, just because we have the delta regions near to the coastal areas, because number of rivers, they have their river mouth in the Bay of Bengal, and they make deltas. So that is why we are having alluvial soil in the coastal regions. And then comes the next category is the red and yellow soil, then black, laterite and arid. So now what we are going to do is, we are going to see what are the different features of different soils, and what is the process of formation of soil, and then what are the specific areas for where specific areas for a particular soil. Now let's see, the first category of the soil is the alluvial soil. Now what is the process of formation of alluvial soil is, it is formed by the deposits brought by the different rivers. Now it is a most widely spread soil, and it consists of sand and silt, and it can be divided into two. One is the old and one is the new alluvial soil. Now old is the Bhangar and the new one is the Khadar soil. Now the soil consists of lot of minerals in it, like potash, phosphoric acid, lime, which is actually very good for the cultivation. So we can, the northern plains have, they are also called as the food bowl of India. So a lot of paddy is grown here, a lot of pulses, wheat is grown here. Then what are the areas? The areas are Rajasthan, Gujarat, then we have coastal plains, then we have the the areas, delta areas of Mahanadi, Godavari, Krishna and Kaveri. So these are the areas of the alluvial soil. Now let's talk about the black soil. Now as far as the process of the formation of black soil is concerned, these soils have been formed due to the solidification of the lava spread, and so that is why it is black in color, and it is also called as a redder soil, and it is extremely fine clay material, and it can hold moisture. A lot of moisture can be held by this, and soil is rich in calcium, carbonate, magnesium, potash, and similarly, so let's see what are the areas for the black soil. Areas for the black soil is the plateau region of Maharashtra, Saurashtra, Malwa, Madhya Pradesh, and it extends to the southeast direction along with the Godavari and Krishna river. Now the next category is the red and yellow soil. It is mainly formed due to the decomposition of the ancient crystalline rocks, which are rich in iron and magnesium. Now what are the features of red and yellow soil is? Features are generally deficient in nitrogen, humus and phosphorus, rich in potash, and suitable for the rice, millet, groundnut, and this soil develops a reddish color due to the diffusion of the iron, and in crystalline and metamorphic rocks it looks yellow when it occurs in a hydrated form. That means when the quantity of the water is more into the soil. Now the areas for this is Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Maharashtra. And now let's move on to the next that is the laterite soil. The laterite soil develops in the area which is having very high temperature conditions, and along with that it is having very high rainfall. So this is the result of the intense leaching, and due to the intense leaching, humus content of the soil is low, because all the microorganisms that are present, particularly the decomposers, they get destroyed, and the laterite soil, it is actually suitable for the cultivation with the adequate doses of manure is required and the fertilizers are required. Just because due to the high temperature and heavy rainfall, the bacteria get destroyed, So that is why so appropriate treatment of the soil is required for that before growing anything. Then the area covered by the laterite soil is Karnataka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Madhya Pradesh, and hilly areas of the Orissa and Assam. Now the next category is that is arid soil. Now arid soil it forms due to the high temperature and evaporation, and as far as the features are concerned, it is sandy in nature, saline in nature, then the salt content is high, and common salt can be obtained by the evaporation of the water, and due to the dry climate, high temperature, the evaporation is very fast, so that is why it lacks humus and moisture, and soil also lacks nitrogen, but presence of phosphates and nitrates makes them fertile wherever the moisture is available. So wherever water is available, something can be cultivated over there. So after the proper irrigation, this soil can be treated. This soil can be, we can actually cultivate this soil. So what are the areas? The areas are Rajasthan and some parts of Gujarat. Now, the next is, so these are some of the important features of the soil. And now let's talk about soil erosion and soil conservation. Now let's see what are the different types of soil erosion. Now the denudation of the soil covers and subsequent washing down is described as the soil erosion. When the top layer of the soil is actually it moves on, it is removed, or it is it goes along with the rain wash, then we say it is a soil erosion. Now the different types of soil erosions are like sheet erosion and gully erosion. Sheet erosion is when the topsoil is actually removed by the heavy rain due to the non-presence of the trees, and gully erosion is the vertical action, the vertical removal of the soil due to the heavy what we say, the flow of water due to the heavy rainfall, again when we don't have any plants or trees onto the land. So there are two types of erosion. One is the sheet erosion and another one is the gully erosion. Now what are the different causes of soil erosion? We have already talked that one reason is the deforestation, then another one is the overgrazing, then construction or the mining areas, they face a lot of soil erosion. Then natural forces like winds or glaciers, water, they also lead to soil erosion. Then it is also caused due to the defective methods of farming, like ploughing in a wrong way, up and down the slope form the channels for the quick flow of water, leading to the soil erosion. So there are a number of human activities, they are also responsible for the soil erosion. Now what are the solutions? If we talk about the solutions, then contour plowing is one of the method. Then terrace farming, strip cropping, shelter belts, control on the overgrazing, afforestation, that means planting of more trees, and control on the mining activities would further lead to the prevention of the soil erosion. So these are some of the good methods by which we can actually prevent soil erosion. Thank you so much.